From the deepest corners of internet lore, what started out as just a creepypasta soon took over the entire world with its fearful implications. We may not feel as lucky, but we did see the rise of a very interesting and terrifying character, the Slender Man. But who is he, and why is he so scary? I mean, how did a suited booted guy who looks like he wants to talk to you about your car's extended warranty ended up becoming one of the most feared of all urban legends? Well, that's what we're here to learn today. In our video, we'll go on a spine-chilling journey and break down everything about Slender Man's origin, the theme, the concept, everything, as well as his powers. So if you're curious about how Slender Man rose to popularity as a terrifying urban legend, then this is the video for you. Before we get into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. What is Slender Man? A lot of us were introduced to the Slender Man after the movie featuring Joey King. Sure, the boogeyman waiting in the forest to kidnap children was a fun concept, but the origin of the character is far creepier. Back in 2009, there was a website called Something Awful. Despite its name, this forum was not about awful things. It was actually a comedy website with a lot of different things to entertain its users. Now, there's a thread on this website called Create Paranormal Images. Here, users were free to take existing pictures and Photoshop something paranormal in them. Sounds like an easy thing to do, right? A little bit of harmless fun, right? Well, that's what Eric Knudsen thought when he made his creation. The picture showed a tall, faceless, suited guy with tentacles standing amongst children, who are blissfully unaware of his presence. The spider-like tentacles of the Slender Man were on full display, and the picture was definitely ominous, even if it was fake. The image quickly became popular, and it was shared enough that it ended up on 4chan. And as you have guessed, ever since Slender Man entered 4chan, there was no looking back. His popularity skyrocketed, and he rose to undying fame. Suddenly, he was everywhere. He was an urban legend horror icon, popping up any place you looked. It was really that simple for a picture created by a man to end up being hailed as an urban legend. See, an urban legend is a story whose origin is not known to anyone. It's a story that's handed down from person to person, modified in their own little ways, but still maintaining the impact. On the internet, doing that is far easier, with shares taking just one measly click. The stories, concept, and themes just got passed around easily enough. While yes, in this case, we know that the source is Something Awful's Paranormal Images thread, but with so many shares and so much talk about it, the source of Slender Man became rather shrouded over time, helping it reach its urban legend status. Now, I know what you're thinking. You said the origin would be far creepier, but this isn't creepy at all. Well, let me get to the creepy bit. So obviously, given that it has reached urban legend status, there are plenty of theories about its source. I mean, yes, Eric Knudsen made the Slender Man, but he did not elaborate on the Slender Man's origin story. The lovely fans of Slender Man decided to cover that instead, and I personally find both of the major theories extremely spine-chilling. There are two theories that explain what Slender Man might be, and those two theories are the Tulpa effect and the quantum theory. What is the Tulpa effect? If you look up the Tulpa effect, you will see that it refers to this mystical Tibetan Buddhist concept where a being or object is created just by mental discipline or spiritual discipline alone. Now, let's say you think of something, an original character, and you give it a form. That means whatever art you create is your thought form. This is called a Tulpa, as only you thought of it. You thought of it, you believed in it, and you created it from scratch. What if there was more than one person who collaborated on your project? You thought of the character, and these other pieces saw your version, your Tulpa, and added things to it. Then the separate beliefs, thoughts, and concepts of everyone come together to create an ultimate thought form, right? This thought form is considered to be an egregore. So if it's one person thinking, then it's called a Tulpa. If there's more than one person thinking and believing in it, it's an egregore. Now, when the Tibetan Buddhist monks mentioned this, they were talking about thought forms in a theoretical way. It was a theory about how when one or more people believe in something and think about something, that something ends up taking a form of its own. The creation of this can be unintentional or deliberate, and the process of making a Tulpa or an egregore is what the Tulpa effect is all about. How does this relate to Slender Man? Well, the Slender Man was first created because Eric Knudsen created a thought form. The idea was simply thrown out on the internet, in the Something Awful forum. And what do you know? The idea is still being carried out today after so many years. Over the years, as the crowd that was absolutely obsessed with Slender Man grew, the more changes we saw in Slender Man himself. His description, his traits, his behavior, everything had subtle changes. Why? Because what started off as Knudsen's Tulpa is now the egregore of the whole Slender Nation, which makes the Slender Man stronger. There's no longer one unified thought form that was behind the creation of Slender Man. Now, given how deep the lore runs, a lot of Slender fans are worried about the creation of a Slender Woman. Once that thought form catches on, we would probably end up seeing the female counterpart of the forest-dwelling boogeyman, which would be double the trouble. But wait, this is not what the creepy part of the theory is. Remember the Slender Man case of 2014, where a 12-year-old girl was stabbed by her friends in the name of Slender Man? Well, this is exactly something this tulpa theory covers. So, given the tulpa theory is all about thoughts and beliefs, it comes as no surprise that we would end up with people who are so enamored by a certain thought or belief that they forget all rationale, right? I mean, it happens to us in daily life all the time, where we forget something just because we're focused on another thing, right? Well, the whole stabbing incident was a serious real-life repercussion of having a strong tulpa of the Slender Man. These young girls wanted Slender Man to be so real that they were willing to get their hands dirty just to feed their own beliefs. Spine-chilling, isn't it? But we aren't done yet. I'm sure you remember that I mentioned there's another theory that supports Slender Man's origins, and that's the quantum theory. As you can guess from the name of the theory, there's a bit of quantum physics associated here, and I totally am not super qualified to explain it, but I'll try to break it down in simpler terms. So the Copenhagen model of quantum mechanics is believed by many to be synonymous with indeterminism. The Copenhagen model is the interpretation of experimental particle data, and indeterminism is the philosophy that everything in this universe, all actions we take, are inherently random. In the Copenhagen model, we see that each electron, and for that matter any other particle, has a wave function. This wave function is not a pathway, but a probability of where in this whole wide world the particle might be. If the wave function gives a packet of high probability at some point, that's where the particle is located, at least in a good deal of likelihood. So from that, what do we understand? We understand that while a particle can be anywhere in space and time, there's a greater possibility of it being, let's say, place A instead of place B. When we collapse the wave function, we are basically forcing the particle to choose a position based on the probability as mentioned in the equation. In human speak, things exist where they do because we observe them there, and no, not the other way around. If it defies common sense, don't worry, quantum physics tends to do that to everybody. Now, what happens when there are several wave functions? Well, as wave functions overlap, the individual probability values get amplified or nullified, and then we get a certain region that has a higher degree of certainty and others where the chances are slim. In quantum jargon, this is called superposition. Now, how is it related to us? Well, we humans are made of several particles, but do we just jump to a different place? No. Our particles are not so mobile. But you know who is mobile? Slender Man. You never see him standing in a fixed position. He's always moving, and his teleportation happens in a second. Slender Man can very well be a particle with a wave function, just bouncing around as he pleases. And then, when an observer sees him, Slender Man gains a certain position, which is how the electron particle is forced to pick one position when we collapse the wave function. So if we were to follow that, we could say that Slender Man is no different from a lonely fundamental particle. He's kind of like the embodiment of probability, because even though he's made of several, and I mean billions of particles, he acts as a single quantum particle instead. If we were to follow this theory, then it would mean that Slender Man is always around us, just out of sight, and if we're vigilant enough, we would be able to see him, which I find extremely terrifying. We also have a theory stating that Slender Man is a trans-dimensional being, and he's from a higher dimension altogether. But in comparison to the tulpa effect and the quantum theory, this dimension-bending theory didn't really stand a chance. There are other non-scientific theories on how Slender Man came to be. They're all collectively called supernatural explanations of Slender Man, as he cannot really be explained away by science. With that being said, let's move on to our next topic. What does he look like? As the Slender Man mythos and origin story is not set in stone, his appearance changes based on the storyteller. However, there are some characteristic traits that have not changed at all over the years. So firstly, he's always described as this extremely tall dude. His height is usually between 6 feet and 15 feet, depending on which story you're reading, but overall, he's a lanky fellow. While his basic silhouette might make you think he's a human, there's nothing human about him except for his features. He has a head, but there's no face on it. His pale skin is a sick contrast against the gray or black suit that he wears. He has these unnaturally long hands, and you can see that his fingers are very bony in comparison to a normal human. His nails are sharp, and the way he just stands there ominously is more than enough to trigger your survival instincts. Now, sometimes you will see that his suit is not at all made of cloth. It's actually skin that's folded in to give an illusion of a business suit. Either way, proving that he's trying to blend in with the crowd. He's clearly adaptive to the environment around him. Usually, he lurks in abandoned locations or forests, and whenever you're not careful, he just pops out of nowhere, thanks to his handy-dandy teleportation skills. Whenever one is in close proximity to Slender Man, they get a bad case of the Slender sickness, which is usually characterized by paranoia, delusions, and nightmares, along with a severe case of nosebleeds. Most of his early stories were focused on him targeting children, passive-aggressively stalking them until the moment was deemed right, and when he did strike, he would drive them insane. It's clear that our man likes torturing his targets with this Slender sickness, making them go absolutely insane from the building paranoia. But there's no exact reason why he likes doing it, or what leads to him picking his victims. He's never portrayed portrayed in a good light because clearly he's a malevolent force. It would be fun to imagine Slender Man as a social creature, attending monsters meetings and such, but he's really not a people person. We don't know if he even understands the human language or why he specifically picks on humans. He just does. Sometimes it's shown that he can possess his targets, but it's mostly his uncanny, borderline human-like appearance that makes him the big scary. He's right there in the uncanny valley, limbo dancing on the edge, because while he looks human, he acts completely alien. Over the years, Slender Man has gone from this organ-ripping attacking monster to a creepy stalker who will drive you insane. One noticeable trend about Slender Man's victims is that Slender Man himself is like a virus. If he's already chasing someone and you come into contact with that someone, he will start chasing you too. But to have him chase someone requires that someone to be absolutely obsessed with him. I mean, say what you want, he has standards. He really said, if you're not obsessed with me, you do not deserve my time. And no, getting bits and pieces of information and clicking on a few of his pictures is not enough to entice him. You have to be obsessed. Given how many people are present in the Slender fan club who are absolutely obsessed with him, it gave rise to a theory that due to his higher dimensional and omnipresent status, he can attack several people at once. Graphic violence and bloody horror are both very common in the Slender Man mythos, even though we can never quite pinpoint what kind of monster Slender Man truly is. I think that's the charm of Slender Man. He's shrouded in mystery, and his intentions are always vague, making it easy to approach his creepy adventures in a unique way in every story. Does he have tentacles? How does it work? This is one of his famous abilities. Slender Man's human-like appearance kind of brings your guard down when you first notice him. Sure, he's a creepy guy without a face, but he is just a creepy guy without a face, you know. Like, sure, I will be weirded out and scared, but I would not be terrified. And then boom, tendrils. While these tendrils or tentacles don't appear as often, they do play a huge role in the original mythos. His tentacles are usually 10 in number, and they would definitely increase more in number if he truly feels like he needs them. These tendrils do not come out of his fingers. I mean, I think that it would be pretty creepy to have noodle fingers, but they come out of his shoulders or back region. At first, only 6 of them come out, and they're more than enough to reach and grab his runaway victims. He can also overtake obstacles using these tentacles. In some iterations of the stories, we see these tentacles having hands attached to them, which makes his grabbing and kidnapping business a tad bit easier. In some of the original mythos stories, these tentacles were shown to be used for walking, balancing, and climbing, kind of like Doc Ock does in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. I mean, you have to be honest, seeing Slender Man use his tentacles to climb up a tree does look very similar to the Doc. In Slender the Arrival, the fully commercialized version of Slender the 8 Pages, we see these tentacles in action, when Slender Man uses them to capture Lauren while she's on her way to the radio tower. He simply spread his tentacles through the forest to block whichever means of escape Lauren might be going for. What is his slender walking ability? I'm sure a lot of you have been waiting for this one. So remember the whole quantum physics talk that I just had? Yeah, well, quantum physics explains his telepathic ability as well as his slender walking ability. Slender walking is the ability that allows the Slender Man to disappear and reappear at will. Thanks to this nifty ability of coming and going as he pleases, he can teleport from one point to another without any sort of indication. He can move virtually anywhere in an instant. Based on which story you're reading, the slender walking can be described in a different way. It can be explained with hard science, like in the quantum theory, or it could be because he's a paranormal being who moves in a supernatural way, which we can't explain that easily. This is all left up to speculation, as there's no concrete statement that explains this phenomenon fully. I personally prefer the quantum argument more. Does he have mind control ability? When you hear the term mind control, what do you think about it? Well, obviously, you think of someone taking over your mind and whatnot. But to what extent? Is there a limit? Well, not in the Slender Man universe, there isn't. This term is used very loosely, and it's a poorly defined topic. However, it's an inevitable topic where the discussion of proxies comes up. What is a proxy? Well, that's a fantastic question. So, Dark Harvest 2, a user, first coined this term. These proxies are just people who work on behalf of Slender Man. Their mind, feelings, thoughts, everything is sensed by Slender Man, and while they have partial free will or know that they're being controlled, they can't do anything about it. They're used by Slender Man to share his information and get more unsuspecting people involved in the Slender Man victim circle. If you want to think about it, it's like a very horrifying multi-level marketing scheme where you don't get rich and just die. Wait, that's how every MLM works. Oh well, you get my point. One of the most iconic examples would be the collective of Tribe 12 and Kate and Charlie Matheson Jr. from Slender the Arrival. In the early days of Slender Man mythos, it was mentioned that the whole mind control thing was controlled by Azoth, a black, almost tar-like substance that appeared to be sentient. It was seen being bled out by the Slender Man, so in a way, you could say that it's his blood. Using his sentient blood, he could control his proxies, and whenever they got injured, the proxies would throw up the Azoth, hence creating this theory. But nowadays, we don't see much of the Azoth, so now it's just a straight-up telepathy. I would say the best experience of this mind-altering business can be experienced while playing Slender Rising 2. Here, as a player, you can find a shotgun that you can use to defend yourself. Now, while you're walking around equipped with the shotgun, you'll have moments where you would find yourself pointing the gun at your face. Right then, the telltale static would show up, even if Slender Man does not. You have to break out of it immediately, otherwise you'll end up shooting yourself in the face, which is simply terrifying. Can he control his visibility to others? What makes the Slender Man such a terrifying foe to go up against would be his selective visibility. He can choose who can see him and when. Sometimes he would only allow his prey to see him while they were with a group, making the prey look absolutely crazy. As his targets are mostly children, it's common that the children will be able to see him while the parents would not, hence not believing the child and pushing them to a deeper paranoia. While he's selectively visible to the naked eye, even Slender Man can fall victim to the paparazzi, because cameras in both digital and pre-digital phases can sense him. Of course, there's a bit of distortion there, but you can see him. Now, because of this selective visibility, you have the argument of an unreliable narrator. You never know who's actually seen Slender Man and who's making up stories. As a Slender fan, you must have noticed that the good boy or the good girl is always killed in the beginning of the stories in the early mythos. That's because animals are usually very receptive to Slender Man, and his selective visibility doesn't work with them. In the Marble Hornets, the operator, as he's known, is shown to disappear and reappear at random. In the movie Always Watching, we see that the operator is only seen when he's on camera. Now, how similar the operator and the OG Slender Man are in behavior is completely based on subjective interpretation, and we'll not be going into details about that. Let us know what you think about this in the comments. Does he have telepathic ability? As we've already mentioned that Slender Man can do mind control, it should come as no surprise that he can also perform telepathy as well. He can alter the minds of his victims by changing up their memories, senses, and perception. He also changes the personality of his prey, making them a ticking time bomb with paranoia and delusion. As most stories show, once one has met the Slender Man, they become extremely paranoid and irritated. They're sometimes severely depressed and even suicidal, which could all be chalked up to the fear of Slender Man's return and the mind control he has over them. This could also be because of the Slender Sickness, which his prey gets just by being in close proximity to him. There's no concrete reason stated on how the Slender Man controls the mental health of his prey, but it's a well-known behavior of his. Can he control weather? People who are into the Slender Man mythos have definitely indulged in quite a few games with him in it. One noticeable thing about the Slender Man games is that he always stalks the player in terrible weather conditions. There's always rain or storms or fog, and it's always at night. The closer the player gets to the end of the game and collects more pages, as we see in Slender, the fog just keeps getting thicker and thicker. In Slender the Arrival, Lauren is seen going to Katie's house, but the time seemed to go pretty fast, and it was night by the time Lauren reached Kate's house. So not only can he control the weather, but he can also change the day and night cycle based on his will to ensure a happy hunting. He can sense his victims. The faceless tall man might seem like someone you can easily blindside. After all, he has no eyes, so it would be easy, right? But that's not the case. Even though he doesn't have eyes, nose, or ears, somehow Slender Man is always able to sense his victims whenever they're near. In Slender and Slender the Arrival, we can see that he always has his sight fixed on the player, even if the player cannot see him. This sense of his is known as the Slender Sense by the fans, and it's a very neat trick to have up your sleeve. And no, this is not just limited to Slender Man himself. If he has a proxy, they too shall have the Slender Sense, which would help them get to you. We see Kate always knowing the player's location in Slender the Arrival, proving this point further. His body is immune to fire. Since the early days, it was made abundantly clear that Slender Man has some relationship with fire. Whenever he shows up, there's a fire. He's seen surrounded by flames whenever he's photographed. This fire, often blue or green in color, is shown to burn everything around him, from witnesses to proof, but never himself. As if being a scary monster wasn't enough, he's also a pyrokinetic, which obviously amps up the ante whenever you have to go against him. How old is Slender Man? Is he immortal? While it's true that from the way he dresses, one would think he's in his early 40s, Slender Man is much older than that. It's been 15 years since his creation, but it's clear that he's an immortal. He cannot be killed, he cannot be stopped, and he cannot be outrun. You can run, you can hide, but you cannot escape Slender Man. If he's not around, his proxies will finish what he started, and that, my friends, is what makes this character so very iconic. Marvelous verdict. Slender Man has been shrouded in mystery for so long, and while the Joey King movie did bring him to the limelight one more time, it did not do his mythos justice. It would be amazing to see the creepypasta stories we grew up with turned into a film that would leave us rethinking turning off the light at night. Or maybe even a realistic retelling of the 2014 Slender Man case would be just what the Slender Man fan club needs to see. Our favorite monster in his true, horrifying glory, that is. We hope you enjoyed this video, and let's hope the Slender Man does not make us his next victims because of this video. Until next time, take care. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone!